Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our March edition of Office Hours. Today, Francesco and I are joined by Brian Remmington, who is our Chief Architect here at Alfresco. He is going to be taking and answering some questions on our digital business platform. I'll let Brian do a full intro once we get through a couple of announcements. So we do have a couple other events coming up. Our next webinar will be Tech Talk Live. That's in the middle of April, on April 18th. We're going to have an ADF sample application for you to check out for that one. We will host Office Hours at the end of April. That's on the 27th, the Friday. We'll be back to Friday at the end of April. Thanks for joining us a day early for the holiday weekend this month. The topic is to be determined, so we'll get that announced on the community as soon as we confirm our guest. We do have 2 meetups coming up for people in, in Europe. So we'll have one, we're finishing up the details for a May meetup in Germany. And then we have a meetup coming up in June that we're not hosting. So thank you to our partners, ATOL, I believe is how you guys pronounce it, for hosting a meetup. That's going to be June 19th, and that's in Paris. You can find out information on all of our webinars, all of our meetups on our community. Just go to community.alfresco.com. You don't have to join or anything to get the information. You can peruse the site, but if you have questions or want to participate, you do need to join the platform. Lots of good blogs, lots of good documents, and tons of Q&A if you guys are interested in some Alfresco resources. So that is the upcoming events. I will hand it to Francesco to talk about what has been happening in the last month.
Thank you very much, Kristen. My name is Francesco Corti. I'm product evangelist for Alfresco. And today, before jumping the usual discussion about what happened, what's going on since the last time, since the last office hour, I would like to share with you something related to the order of the bee. Do you know what the order of the bee is? If you don't know, you should be aware, you should know. The order of the bee is the independent organization of Alfresco enthusiasts. And inside the order of the bee, you can find Alfresco enthusiasts. There are Alfresco employees. For example, I'm proudly part of the Order of the Bee. There are customer partners or simply enthusiasts in general. So the news is that there are the board election of the Order of the Bee are quite close. So they are planned roughly in June. So now it's the right time to become a voting member. So you probably know, or you probably don't know, that a subset of the Order of the Bee are defined as voting member, has the voting rights, and this is due to, so the voting rights are given in terms of contribution, in terms of action, practical action that you do for the community. So if you are doing something and you want to contribute, please be involved. If you are not doing enough, please start doing, because you can vote for the Order of the Bee. So the first information is about the board election of the Order of the Bee is quite close. So please join to become a voting member. The second information I would like to share with you is about one friend of the Order of the Bee, and one friend of us. There is Richard Asplin. Richard Asplin is not anymore an Alfresco employee, and he's joining another adventure. So we are all sad from one point of view, but from others' point of view, we want Richard engage with us. So you probably know that to be part of to be proposed to the board of the election, of course, you must be nominated by at least 3 persons. Well, what happened is that Richard Asplin, now that is not anymore Alfresco employee, will be nominated to be part of the board of the Order of the Bee from lots of people. This is a great news. So this is the second information I would like to share with you. But I don't want to steal time also to the content. So remember to become to have the voting rights for the Order of the Bee, because we need you in the ecosystem. So changing topic, let me jump to share what happened since the last time in the Alfresco community. Can you see my screen, Kristen or Brian?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Brian. So As usual, we are not interested in news in general because we are here to discuss about Alfresco news, because this is what we are talking about. Very, very fastly, I would like to start from the 27th of February, when the last office hour happened. These are two great contributions from Vencia and Cristina Martin with his team about two nice tutorials on ADF. The usual Uncle Borroy with lots of contribution, interesting contribution about Alfresco Share, and SN Vault that released under LGPL 3.0 an electronic signature for Alfresco. Are you aware about Harlin Serit? He's a great guy that is releasing lots of interesting tutorial about Alfresco. Thank you, Harlin, for doing that. So 1 month ago, I would like to highlight the Alfresco Community Edition 2018 February. Hold on, because today, maybe tomorrow, we have a great news about another great release of Alfresco Content Services Community Edition. So activity team is working hard. As you can see, every week, the activity team through Maurizio Salatino release a weekly log, what happened in the week, so you can follow him. If you are not aware, there is a blueprint section where you can try your Activity 7 beta version in a practical environment with a practical example. I suggest you to take a look at that. So from the order of the bee, this is a nice information about how Alfresco evolves in the time and in the years. So I think it's a great news to see. As Kristen was saying, we are very interested. We are pushing hard to have more presence on the ground. So we had in London Alfresco meetup. We had in Nantes another meetup. Uncle Borroy brought the Order of the Bee to conferences. So if you want to join physically a conference alone with your company, let us know. We want to support you, of course, if you are going to talk about Alfresco. ADF team, a bunch of interesting tutorials and articles. Of course, I would like to submit to your attention ADF 2.2 that has been released the 5th of March. Also, as a consequence, the Alfresco content application, quite interesting and really downloaded from Denis Wojka. It is a new version following the new release of ADF. Did you see that the community portal has an Amazon Web Service page dedicated to all the AWS blog posts and services? You should take a look at that. Also very interesting, an article from talking about the activity team and an interview of Ray Dawson and Rafael Allegri. Xanit with Alfred solution. You should see the webinar that is publicly released. Also, the Alfresco Audit Shell plugin and add-on, sorry, that has been released with Atoll CD. I don't know if it's the right way to say it. And the book of the Angular book that you can read for free for free, but with a appreciated contribution from Denis Wojka. Rafael Allegri released an article about AWS Quick Start on process services, really interesting. And this is a nice contribution, ADF tutorial from Uncle Borroy in Spanish and English. And he shared also a personal experience using Alfresco content application. So I am at the end of my contribution, and sorry, Brian, for stealing you the time, but my latest news is about thanking and saying goodbye for now to Richard Estlin. He's starting a new adventure. We will miss you, but what I can say, thank you for all the fish, Richard. Looking forward to meet you around. And of course, we hope also on some Alfresco technology. So let me stop this update, and I'm going to leave the mic to Brian. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Francesco. And what a huge amount going on in the community. Amazing. Right, let me share my screen. Okay, are you seeing the first slide, Francesco?
Yes, we can see.
Good. All right. So hello, everybody. My name is Brian Remmington. I'm Chief Architect at Alfresco. Some of you will have seen me talk, give a keynote talk about the evolution of Alfresco's digital business platform at DevCon in Portugal, and some of you won't have done. What I want to do is sort of recap a little bit of that, and then go in and answer some questions, really. So as I talk, please do use the IRC chat and use the chat on the YouTube channel to ask more questions. Ask me anything you like. I'll do my best to answer. I won't have the answer to all the questions. Not everything is up to me at Alfresco, unfortunately, but I'll do the best I can. So please do use this facility. I'm here to answer questions, so please try and get the most out of me that you can. So the Alfresco digital business platform, we've sort of come up with this tagline, which is the second line on this slide, which tries to encapsulate what we're trying to achieve at Alfresco. So power digital transformation by delivering a frictionless digital business platform. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the frictionless side of that. But first of all, just a recap of what we already have. So again, I think many of you listening in will be familiar with the Alfresco platform, maybe more on the content side or more on the process side rather than together. But I'm sure you'll have read or used Alfresco technology in the past. So what we already have is the three primary pillars of content, process, and governance. All of them homegrown, all of them created by Alfresco engineers, and all of them working together. And so if you're using ACS, the content services, you'll be used to using workflow capability, so the sort of process side of content. If you're using APS, you're used to sort of combining that with content and attaching content into processes. And if you're using content services with governance services, that's very tightly connected in together. And we know, because we've got customers and partners and community members using our technology all over the world, we know that the platform that we already have is very secure, it's very scalable, it's very reliable. So those three facets we know because we're being used by thousands of different companies at very large scale. So in financial services in particular, in government, where security and scalability and reliability are critical. So these are very large scale critical business operations being used on our platform. So the likes of FINRA, Capital One in financial services, Cisco in high-tech manufacturing, and NASA, for example. They're all using our technology. And many of you listening in will also be very aware, in fact, maybe are using our technology because we also like to do things in the open. So we like to have open source, we like to interact with our community, and we like to conform with open standards and, in fact, be on committees, technical committees for open standards, wherever it's applicable to what we're doing. And then the other thing that sort of differentiates our platform from other vendors is that we're also demonstrably cloud ready. So all of our products are being used by large organizations in cloud environments already. And that's quite unusual for the content management space and also in the process management space. It's quite unusual to have so many companies using the technology at scale in cloud environments, and particularly we're focusing and doing very well with AWS implementations. So that's what we already have. And if we sort of look at where are we going, what are we trying to do, and how are we evolving the platform, again, focusing on that word frictionless from that tagline, what we want to do is accelerate the time to value by eliminating DevOps friction. So if I go into that a little bit, so what's most important for us and what we believe is most important for our customers and partners is to get the most value out of our platform in as little time as possible. So drive down the implementation time from maybe months, small numbers of months, to weeks, and then from weeks to days. So get it down to a small number of days where you can have meaningful solutions built on top of the platform, and never be satisfied with how quickly you can do it. So we're always looking at how can we make it even quicker for people to build their solutions on top of our platform. And the best way of doing that is to look at how people currently build solutions and how they use our platform, and work out where is the friction. So from the point of deciding to build a solution and selecting the Alfresco platform as a basis for that solution, from that point of selection through to actually having a production grade solution, what has to happen? What are the steps that need to take place? And where are the sticking points? Where is the friction? So how can we make, if we focus on where the sticking points are, then, and work out how to eliminate those, then the whole process of going all the way through from inception through to a production grade system, all the design and implementation and test, make that as slick as it possibly can be to make sure that you can get to a valuable solution as quickly as you possibly can, and constantly driving that time down. So that's kind of what we want to achieve. So how can we do that? So there are a number of things that we can do to achieve that. First of all, if you look at the current platform, there are places in the platform where there are duplications of functionality. So, for example, if you want to do content transformation, so in the content repository, there are many different transformations that you can do within the repository itself. But then we also have another sort of smaller scale transformation capability in the process services component as well, used to generate PDFs, for example, of Word documents. So where there is duplication like that, we want to eliminate that duplication, partly because it means that if there's a problem with a particular component, we can fix it once and it's fixed across the entire platform. And partly from an administration point of view, when you're deploying this and managing it yourself in production, you don't want to be managing lots of different ways of doing things. So if there is a way that we can bring those together so there is a consistency, then we'll be doing that. So transformations is one example. Another example at the moment is on process services and content services. You would sync from LDAP if you've got users and groups stored in an LDAP directory. Currently, you'd sync that into both the process services and the content services. So over time, removing those duplications to make it easier to manage. We also want to eliminate any inconsistencies that we have across what I describe here as the technical surface of the platform. Maybe it's worth just talking a little bit about what that means. So in its simplest form, the technical surface of the platform is the set of APIs that we expose to enable people to build solutions. But it also expands out to be the interactions that you'd have from a monitoring point of view, for example, or a configuration point of view. So any part of the platform that you as either a developer, an architect, or a sysadmin would touch make those things consistent with one another so that you don't have a different experience when dealing with one part of the platform than you'd have if you dealt with a different part of the platform. So for example, where we have REST APIs, making sure that those REST APIs look and feel the same, whether you're using the content part of the platform or the process part of the platform or the governance part of the platform. It shouldn't matter which bit of the platform you're using, it should all feel like an Alfresco platform. So again, where we spot those inconsistencies and where we're told that there are inconsistencies, eliminate those again over time to make it as smooth and easy an experience as possible for building solutions on. The next thing here, and this is really important, and in fact you would have seen us starting to do that last year and maybe even in the year before, try continuously to focus on technology that you are familiar with. So if you are building a solution on top of Alfresco as a platform, this won't be the first solution that you've developed. You'll be developing solutions on different technology for different purposes, and you'll have done that through your careers, I imagine. So where we can, where there are technologies out there and platforms and frameworks out there that people are already familiar with and are already popular and definitely are open, then we will also consolidate and move towards those technologies as well. So one example, for example, is the ADF, the Application Development Framework, moving away from a more proprietary framework towards a framework Angular, which is well known, well adopted. It's easier to find people with those skills to build solutions rather than relying on anything that's proprietary from Alfresco. So as far as we can, where we see that there is a technology or a framework or a platform that we can leverage, that means we don't have to reinvent wheels, we'll be doing that. The other thing, and I think this possibly concerns some people, but we want to move away from monoliths, and we're not alone in doing this. This is a fairly common thing to want to do at the moment, but try and enable people to use the platform and to scale the platform in ways that make sense to them. So at the moment, for example, taking the transformation service as the example here, right now the transformations are built into the repository unless you go for the document transformation engine. And therefore, to scale the transformation component, you replicate out the repository. And that's certainly very possible. You can scale out the repository to many, many different nodes. But what we'd like to do is offer a greater flexibility so that if you want to scale just the transformation component, then you have that option. So separate out the transformations from the core repository so that they can be scaled separately, managed separately, so they've obviously got different behavior and they're different purpose in your architecture. So make them a separate entity that you can manage as you wish, rather than sort of forcing you to manage it as part of the repository. So that's one example, and there are other examples where we just want to tease apart the common capabilities that make sense to scale out separately and enable you to do that. And again, this is something that's going to evolve over time. And it's also something that will enable us to provide even greater resilience in the platform than we currently have. So again, if take example of transformations, because it seems to be my pet example today, it is possible to form a malformed document that can cause the transformation process to go into sort of overdrive, if you like, sort of almost iterate and recurse on itself. By separating these capabilities out, it means that that doesn't cause any problems with your runtime service. It just takes one node out, and you can detect that that's happened and replace it with a new one without changing the behavior of your core services. So again, improve the resilience, improve the scalability. And then the last thing that can't be understated is the ability to sort of work out how to do things. So providing SDKs, providing examples, providing documentation that enables you to actually work out how to use the platform. In fact, can I just check, is my video on? I've just noticed my camera light isn't on.
No, we can see your slides and everything is fine. We can hear you.
Yeah, we don't see you. We just see your slides.
Okay, maybe that's a Google Hangout thing. So yeah, provide documentation, provide samples, provide how-to videos, provide more resources to enable people to consume the platform and develop solutions more easily. So that's an important component of this work as well. It's not just the technology, it's the enablement of using the technology as well. So over time, if you were to look at our platform at the moment, right now, today, what you would see is the repository, the process engine, and the insight engine as the primary pillars of the platform. What you're seeing on the screen here is an illustration of the kind of thing that we're sort of aiming towards. It's only a high-level block diagram. It's not terribly useful in that sense, but what hopefully it illustrates is that we will start to tease apart certain things. So for instance, you see the transformation service there as a separate entity with some transformation engines at the bottom there that you can scale out as you wish. In fact, each one of these components becomes a scalable component in its own right. Making use of more asynchronous communication between the different components, again, to provide greater scalability and greater resilience to failure and fault tolerance. Separating out the identity service so that rather than, as I mentioned before, rather than syncing LDAP repositories twice, we actually have a single service that looks after things to do with people, so users and groups, for example, all managed by the identity service and consumed by the services sitting inside the shell. And just talking about the shell there, that's made up of two things, the API gateway and the event gateway. So shielding you as consumers of the platform from the details of how the platform is achieving its goals. So providing a clean interface that's well defined, both for request response type interactions through the API gateway, and also through asynchronous event notifications. So if you want to listen to things that are going on in the platform and then respond to them, listen into the event gateway, subscribe to events from the event gateway. So because of that, enabling you to have a clean, well-defined and consistent interface that you can use to build your solutions on top of the platform and sort of be isolated from changes. As we start to tease apart these services, as I've talked about, you're sort of isolated from those changes and your solutions are stable and reliable as long as they're talking to those well-defined public interfaces. So again, over time, this is the kind of architecture that we're evolving towards. We've made a start on that already, and you'll start to see more of these services coming out and more of these interactions. And in fact, at the moment, if you were to look at Activity 7 as a project, that's a good indication of where we're going from a process point of view. And it's breaking down what's described in here as the process engine as quite a large grain block, breaking that down into smaller services that from an interface point of view, just looks like a process. In fact, looks like an application in the process world, but is broken down into finer grained pieces inside there. But because you're talking to the interface, the gateway, it actually doesn't matter how it's implemented under the covers. You sort of are talking to it at a different level, if you like.
So, sorry, Brian, to interrupt you,
Sure.
and even if we agreed to collect the question at the end, but there is an interesting question coming from the IRC that probably you can face now. So it's a newbie question, but it's an interesting question. Can you please share in few words what the heartbeat service is? Thank you very much, and sorry for interrupting.
That's right. Okay, so the heartbeat service, it doesn't exist yet. That's something that is likely to come along at some point. So there is already a heartbeat in the Alfresco content repository. And what it does is send basic anonymous information back to Alfresco, giving indications about sort of how many repositories are out there and how big are they, that kind of thing. At the moment, that's just in the repository. The way that we use that is to get some idea of how our product's being used so that we can work out which bits are being used a lot, and therefore we should focus attention on enhancing, and which bits maybe aren't being used at all. We don't have very good information at the moment. It's really just how big is the repository and maybe how many different content types there are. Again, we don't get information about what the content types are or anything that could be sensitive like that. It's just basic high-level information. But as we evolve the product, it's actually very useful for us to get a little bit more insight about which capabilities are being most used by customers and partners and members of the community, so that we can make sure that we're addressing the right things from the product roadmap point of view, and possibly even looking at which bits aren't being used at all that we can start to put less attention on. So that's what the heartbeat service is. It's a centralized capability for taking information from the various components, packaging it up and sending it to Alfresco to help with product development. As I say, it is very anonymous in nature. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yes, definitely.
Good. So that's all the talking I wanted to do at you. The next bit is questions, and this is really where I hope I can answer as many questions as possible. So Kristen earlier, in fact, possibly a week ago, set up a Slido event, and we've had some questions through there. Are we getting many questions through on IRC or in the YouTube channel at the moment?
Well, I think you can, Brian, go ahead with the collected question. But I would like to remind to everyone that if you ask more questions, it's the right time to do so. Use the RC channel at chat.alfresco.com or the YouTube chat that you can find directly on the right, probably, or your Windows. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Brian. You can go ahead. I don't know why you call you Richard. Probably
I couldn't possibly step into Richard's shoes. Yes, so just to reiterate, please do ask questions. So we don't claim to have all the answers, and we don't claim that we are absolutely building the right thing. It's people in the community that want to actually use the platform that really will drive the architecture. I'm not a big fan. It's not architecture for architecture's sake. We have to deliver a platform that you can use and consume. So please do ask questions. Please do raise concerns. At the end of this, I'll share my email address, although it's very guessable. But if you don't want to ask a question in this session, please drop me an email. So the first question that we had on the Slido event is this one. So will Alfresco be available for deployment in small companies in any other way different from Docker Compose or Kubernetes? Okay, so the first thing is that there's a qualification of small companies here, and I'm not quite sure why that qualification is in there. I think it was Angel that asked this question. So the answer is yes. So initially, especially on the content side, we're not planning to go fully containerized yet. In fact, we don't even know whether going fully containerized is the right thing to do on the content side. And therefore, so version 6 of Alfresco Content Services is coming out sort of towards the middle of this year, and that will have Docker containers or Docker images as part of the release. So you can certainly download those images and use them, and they will be supported images. But also, we are still releasing the zip files. So if you want to just take them and deploy them yourself in Tomcat or whatever, you can do that. So over time, that may change, but right now, we're not sure that people are ready to just go fully containerized and fully orchestrated. So we're not imposing that on people. On the process side, it's a little bit different. The process side is slightly more dynamic in a way, that you have applications and you iterate around on process definitions. That lends itself better almost to containerization and orchestration. And so with Activity 7 and APS version 2, which is later on this year, we will be aiming at Kubernetes as the primary orchestration and Docker containers as the primary way of deploying APS. And we'd be obviously very keen to hear feedback on how that looks. So if you haven't downloaded and started to play with Activity 7, please do that. It would be very interesting for us to get feedback as to what your experience of doing that is. So hopefully that answers that question. On the content side, version 6 is coming out now, and Francesco mentioned the community releases that are coming out soon as well. You'll be able to download the zip files or the Docker images for those. On the process side, we're looking more towards containerization and Kubernetes there. And actually, there's no real difference whether you're a small company or a big company. My view on this is that at the moment, I think that orchestration and containerization is a similar stage to where hypervisors and virtualization was about 18, 20 years ago. And I'm confident that that will become the way. It's actually more efficient to run different applications in containers than to have spin up different virtual machines for each of them. So whether you're a small company or not, I think this is the way things are going. That's our sense at Alfresco. So small company or big company, I'd certainly recommend becoming more familiar with Docker and containerization and orchestration technologies. They're really quite good. Hopefully that answers that, but Angel, please come back on IRC or in the YouTube channel if there's any follow-on. And in fact, anybody else, if you've got any follow-on questions to these, then please pop them in the relevant channels. So, hello.
We'll tell you if we have more questions. No problem on that. Thank
yeah,
you,
I'll keep plowing through. So in fact, I'll pause at the end of the ones that we've got through Slido. I'll pause and I'll come back to you, Francesca. So, how are current add-ons to be ported to new cloud-based architecture? That's a good question, and it's a difficult one to answer actually, because there are many add-ons that do different things in different ways. So if the add-on, well, I suppose there are two things to say here. First of all, there's nothing that is changing. We're not doing any cliff edge change to the platform. So if there is a capability and a part of the technical surface that exists today, then that technical surface will continue to exist tomorrow and quite a long time into the future. So we're aware that we have many customers and many implementations generally, both community and enterprise, that are built on the current technical surface of the platform. And one thing that we do not want to do is to create any cliff edge for people that will stop people from upgrading to new versions. So we're going to be really quite careful about how we evolve to this new architecture. So first of all, that's the first thing to say. There is time. We're sort of talking about this in plenty of time for people to start thinking about what would this particular add-on look like in the new architecture. We don't own the add-ons. They're built by members of the community generally. So hopefully by talking about these things and sort of mentally preparing people, the people who do add those, own those add-ons can start thinking about how would those add-ons evolve to this new architecture. And also, this is really important, so I'll restate it, come back to me, come back to Alfresco if there are particular add-ons that you think, I have no idea how this could possibly work in this new architecture, because that can actually help us work out, well, either work with you to actually work out how that might work, or indeed spot a gap in our plans and change, sort of adapt to fill that gap. So possibly not a great answer, in fact possibly not even an answer at all, but we don't own the add-ons, other people do. By us sharing and talking, and for you as owners of the add-ons talking back to us and sharing with us, that's the way that those will evolve towards the new architecture. So the next question, in fact, I think Angel asked all of the most popular questions, so we haven't even got through Angel's questions yet. Thank you, Angel. So this question is, how is the Alfresco SDK being evolved to make it easier to develop and test well-sized services? And I think that's probably taken from my DevCon talk. I'm fairly pragmatic, so microservices has the micro bit of it suggests that it's going smaller than maybe we're planning. We may have a few microservices in the proper sense, but generally we're looking at just the right size services to fulfill the job. I'm not a big fan of architecture for architecture's sake. So actually, as far as possible, the SDK becomes less of a framework and set of code, if you like, and more a set of tooling and documentation and examples, really, sort of a complete package of information needed to develop solutions. Something that we'd like to achieve is the ability for people to build their own solutions using the development pipelines that they're familiar with and the technologies that they're familiar with, and to hook into the platform through REST APIs and messages and events coming through topics and possibly through streams as well, to mean that actually the SDK becomes possibly a relatively thin set of client libraries, not dissimilar to what AWS might provide for their services, that you can just take and consume and use in the way that is most natural to you. Rather than today, if you want to extend the platform, you actually are building things into the repository, or you're building Java delegates that's going to be plugged directly into the process engine. And so you're sort of very tightly integrated into, you're not just deploying your stuff, you're also deploying our stuff at the same time. So it's currently harder. What we're trying to do is sort of separate those two things out, so you don't have to deploy us and you at the same time. You deploy us and then you create your own capabilities sort of around the platform. Hopefully that makes some sense. Again, I can't go into massive detail, but hopefully it gives you a sense of the direction that we're going. But again, be assured that the SDK in its current format, while the technical surface of the platform stays as it currently is, and we sort of evolve towards this new approach, the Alfresco SDK doesn't go away and continues to be supported and enhanced to take advantage of new capabilities as they come out. This is definitely an evolution. We're not looking for a big bang here.
Sorry, Brian. Can I interrupt you, because we have a couple of questions from the YouTube chat, so probably you might be interested also to face them. The first is about the roadmap of the digital business platform. So more precisely, is there a time roadmap for completing the whole architecture as you have shown here? Then I have another question for you.
Okay, the answer to that one is no. There are many things that we are doing as well as this evolution of the architecture, and we need to balance both of those two things. So when I spoke at DevCon, the slides were suitably vague. So we've already started the work. So for instance, we've already started to work on the sort of consistent way of deploying so containerization, orchestration. We've started work on providing consistent single sign-on across the platform. And we've also started working on the event gateway. That's really quite early now, but we've started thinking about that event gateway and what that would look like. So work is underway, but at the same time, we're making sure that we're creating enhancements on the platform that are not just architectural, so functional capabilities as well. So I would say that probably over the next couple of years, you'll see this evolution happening. So I'm hopeful that we'll have a significant chunk done this year, but I'm also aware that we're unlikely to get it all done, and we will go into the next year as well. So probably over the next couple of years, but then even beyond that, I'm expecting that the evolution of people solutions will require that the existing technical surface stays in place in parallel with the new technical surface, while people adapt to that and evolve their own solutions to it. So, which could take years. I can't quantify how many years, but a good number of years. This isn't going to be a click your finger job. What was the other question, Francesco?
The other question is about Docker and Kubernetes. So the question is Alfresco on Docker Kubernetes fully supported right now? If not, when?
Okay. So as I mentioned, Alfresco Content Services version 6 will include, as part of the artifacts, some of the artifacts that you get there will be certified, supported Alfresco Docker images. The same will be true for APS, so that's the Process Services version 2, which is coming out later this year. So the next major versions of the products will support Docker images and will have supported Docker images as part of the product artifacts.
Thank you, Brian.
A pleasure. Okay, so the next question. How will Alfresco support transitively atomic business actions when services are decomposed into microservices / a bunch of non-transactional REST calls? I might be able to guess who asked this question, but they didn't say. So I suppose actually the simple answer to this is, if we just go for event-based mechanisms and REST calls, then obviously the answer is that we won't support atomic business actions because they are not transactional. However, on the content side, I'm aware that there are some use cases that do require transactionality. And what I'd be really keen to understand from people who are writing such solutions is, what is the scope of those transactional capabilities, what exactly is needed and why is those capabilities needed, so that we can work out what we do about it. So it is possible, and possibly even likely, that on the content side in particular, there will be certain transactional parts of the technical surface that will have to remain. I'm keen to actually simplify the technical surface to the smallest possible set of APIs that we can possibly get away with, because that just makes sense. So we want it to be consistent and coherent and complete, but we don't want to go too far. However, if that means that we have to keep some transactional elements, especially on the content repository, then we need to think about what that is, and we would need your help to identify what the smallest possible set of interfaces would be needed to support the transactional use cases that you're experiencing. So the answer is, if we go fully down this route, obviously it won't be transactional, but I'm aware that we may need to retain some transactional elements, in which case I'd like to understand which bits, so that we can refine the internal technical surface of the repository to be the smallest possible set that we can get away with, and maybe even make that an optional component that you only get it if you specifically want transactional behavior. So a really good question. Obviously, the cloud native way is non-transactional, and that's what all the sort of larger scale systems are tending towards. Whether we can do that or not depends really on what requirements we see. So again, please drop me an email. Let's have a chat. In fact, if you can give me, let me see customer requirements and maybe designs of what you've done, then that would be very helpful. So let's have a conversation. We purchased Alfresco for document management via share. How will Alfresco replace or support small enterprises to continue using Alfresco? So again, it's worth talking a little bit about the length of time that share will be around. So share will be around for a long time yet. So I've talked about ACS version 6. ACS version 6 includes share, and that hasn't gone away from the Alfresco Content Services product, and it won't go away for a long time yet. So there are a number of reasons for that. So at the moment, there are quite a few capabilities that are only accessible through share. And in fact, one of the big ones is our records management capability, which is an important one. So share isn't going away. Share is staying put, and share will continue to be supported. However, share isn't our strategic user interface and our strategic user experience. That's being replaced with components that comprise the application development framework that I mentioned a little earlier. And also, at the moment, we have an example content application. The product manager for that is John Knowles, and I'm sure he'll be looking for input as to where that should be going. And a follow-on question is the example content application going to be a product? Well, is it going to be a replacement for share? I think the answer is no. We're not planning on replacing share. It is possible that we will have a content management application that maybe is based on the example content application in the future. That hasn't been fully decided yet. We are focusing as much as we can on being the very best platform that we can be to enable builders, developers to actually build solutions on top of. So right now, don't worry about share. It's going to exist. It's going to be in 6.0, and therefore it will be in every point release of 6.x. It's not going anywhere in any short time frame. So continue to use it, but also think about what would you need from Alfresco to replace it? What are the capabilities of Share that you're using heavily, and what would you need of a replacement application? So Share does too many things. It does lots and lots of different things. What is the set that you're using? And then we can make sure that we're developing the things that either enable you to build a solution that does what you need, or maybe we can build a solution that actually does it ourselves. At the moment, right now, we haven't decided to create a supported product that is a replacement for Share. Will the deployment architecture evolve to be AWS specific? So the simple answer to this question is no, we won't be AWS specific. In fact, as far as possible, we'll use open standards from a deployment point of view as much as we will from a platform functionality point of view. So that's why we've selected Docker and Kubernetes, because they are best of breed and they are open source. Will on-premise versus cloud-native versions of platforms be available? Well, I think there's probably an assumption in that question that I don't necessarily agree with. So if you're going for a containerized solution and you're using Docker and Kubernetes, you can actually deploy that on-premise as well as you can deploy it in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, whatever you want, really. That's part of the advantage of containers and orchestration. You can put it on your laptop, you can put it in your data center, or you can put it in AWS data center. It really doesn't matter. You're sort of isolated from the choices that you make there. So hopefully that answers that question. But again, come back to me if it doesn't. So those were all the questions that came off Slido. Francesco, have we had any others?
Well, I think that all the main relevant questions has been covered. That's all, I think, from the IRC channel and the YouTube channel. And again, very few minutes if you have more. I don't know.
Okay, I can always do more. So these are some questions we've had from people who haven't put them in Slido. So this one is, which technologies form the base of the event gateway, message broker, identity service, form service, function service? And this could take half an hour to answer. So I've got, how long, 3 minutes?
I'm about to say, this is kind of our last call. If you're watching and you do have a question, go ahead and put it in the YouTube chat or in the IRC chat. And if for some reason we aren't able to get to you in the time, we'll post it in the community and respond to you there.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so where to start with this? So, okay, let's talk a little bit. So message broker, that's a relatively straightforward one. So already in our architecture, if you're using, for example, the sync service, you'll be using ActiveMQ as the message broker between the repository and the sync service. So ActiveMQ will be our favored choice for the message broker. The event gateway, I mentioned earlier that we've just started work on the event gateway, and it's very early days. So we're sort of experimenting with Apache Kafka at the moment as a way of providing streams, so that you can just hook into a stream of events from the platform and process it however you wish. However, we're also aware that maybe that's not where people's minds are at right now. It's relatively new, not terribly new, but relatively new. So we're also exploring other options around sort of just topics and events sitting on a message broker. So again, actually your thoughts on that would be quite interesting to us at the moment. Would you like a sort of Kafka-based event stream coming off the platform, or would you prefer to have it just a topic hierarchy on a message broker? Identity service. So we are adopting as the basis of our identity service the Keycloak project, which is a Red Hat project. That provides many capabilities. In fact, we're also using it not just as the basis of the identity service, but also as the basis of single sign-on across the platform. So you'll see that coming out again in the next few months. We'll have the first cut of the identity service that will be built on top of the Keycloak project. Form service, not sure that there is a real basis of that. I mean, the general basis of these components will be Spring Boot. However, I don't know of any good open source projects that provide forms capabilities in any useful way. So we may be building that one ourselves from scratch. And the function service, haven't really started thinking about that either. If you look in Activity 7, you'll see that they're using Spring Cloud connectors to offboard some of the service task capability. So if you want custom code to run as part of your process, you would write a Spring Cloud connector, which is just a small Spring Boot service. The function service may go down that path as well, but we haven't really got to thinking about that yet. So again, ideas and suggestions always welcome. Am I out of time, or should I keep on going?
I think we may have time for one more. You and I don't have a hard stop, and people can watch this recorded if for some reason they have to go. So if you want to take one more, we are caught up on the questions in IRC. And I think you covered this. There was one more that came in about share in the YouTube that was just asking about the time frame for how long will we continue to support Alfresco community share. So I think you got that one.
Yeah.
For the foreseeable future.
There is a date currently, yeah. But it's still part of the releases we're making. So it hasn't. Okay. So how and when is the architecture evolving towards microservices? It's possible that I've covered that one already. So we're not aiming at sort of tiny microservices. We're just gradually teasing apart services as it makes sense from the large services that we currently have to enable greater resilience and scalability. Really, that's the primary goal there. And to remove duplications where we have it. And how can I scale the digital business platform? Well, pretty much every box on this diagram is scalable in its own way. So horizontal scalability, right now you can scale the repository. So we've tested it with up to 20 repository nodes. Process engine, similarly, you can scale out, and the Insight engine, which is based on Solar, is very scalable as well. As we move forward, everything that you see here will be independently scalable. That's kind of the point of this, really, is to make sure that you have more options. You can home the system to match your needs more precisely than you're able to currently. So make it finer grained scalability, greater resilience than even greater resilience than we currently have. And those were all the questions. So I think we've done all the questions. That's my email address. If you think of any other questions that I haven't covered, please do email me. If you've got any suggestions around the areas that we've talked about, but I've asked for some ideas and thoughts around, then please email me as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, for joining us today. Francesco had to jet out at the top of the hour for another meeting. But I will see everybody at our next Tech Talk Live. That, again, is going to be on April 18th, and it's going to be with an ADF content app to check out. We'll be announcing topics for the next office hours. So that's it for us. I hope everybody has a nice holiday extended weekend. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.